Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Physiology Secrets podcast. Back here for the number 3 on our new way of showing the podcast. Hopefully you've been enjoying the video format if you have been watching on YouTube or Facebook, as well as in the traditional sense on the podcast app as well. We thought we'd jump on today and do this episode off the back of some really awesome data we got from one of our athletes recently, Nicola, who just finished his 3 Peaks Challenge. Was building up from end of last year into the 3 Peaks Challenge a couple of weeks ago. We actually tested him on Monday and saw his VO2 max was up by a huge 24% in only a 4-month turnaround. So outstanding results, the highest his VO2 has been since he has been working with us over the last couple of years as well. So really stoked for him and that result. But we thought it's a perfect time to talk about how do we know what training we need to do when we do assess someone. How do we know what training we need to do to then be able to get them to the point at which they're fully prepared for their event. So what we want to talk about first is when we are looking at an athlete working towards their goal race, their goal event, whatever type of activity they're training for, what's the first step? How do we know what sessions to actually give that athlete to make sure they improve their VO2, reach their peak performance, achieve their goal, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the goal is to reach peak performance so that they are successful in whatever they're trying to do. So with anything, it's always a needs analysis, and it doesn't matter what the sport is. Like say, we get kayakers, we get anybody, like mountaineers, we get people that want us to help improve their performance. We don't coach those type of people, but it's really at the same time, it's just a needs analysis. So using Nicola as an example, he's coming off the back of he does half Ironman distance, so just over 4.5 hours is his PB. And we're going to go do a 3 Peaks event with the goal of 11 hours, about 11 hours, wasn't it? So more than double the duration. We just do a needs analysis. So using that example, it's pretty clear that we're going to have to work on the base training phase and get the volume up there. So what does 3 Peaks involve? It's not going to be at threshold. So all right, we've got 11 hours of duration. Intensity is definitely less than a half Ironman. It's probably somewhere around 60-70% VO2 max. What are the key components? Aerobic capacity is more important than aerobic power. We have to complete the distance rather than necessarily complete it very fast. So it's just looking at the event from an outside perspective and being which fitness components are important. And in this circumstance, it was obviously going to be aerobic capacity. Lactate threshold, maybe a little bit on the hills. All right, there's hills. So that's again another thing. What's the terrain like? So look at the sport. What do you need to be successful at that distance or that event? And then work backwards from there.
Yeah, cool. So performing a bit of a needs analysis, understand the components of the event is going to give you that path of what we actually need to do to get prepared and be as specific as possible. In that regard then, 3 Peaks, like I said, slightly different in terms of duration to a 70.3, different to a marathon, different to a kayak event. All these have different needs. Does that change the length of time we need to prepare ourselves for prior to going to that event to make sure we hit that peak performance, or is it all going to be, we all need 6 months, it's just a closed window of that's how long you've got to prepare for an event, or does it change based on those needs?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it is going to change, and it's number one step is do some baseline testing, whether that's with us or by yourself, it doesn't matter, but you need to get a baseline and figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are behind that. It sort of just reminded me of something there, like if let's say you're a swimmer and then you want to do running, well, you're using different muscle groups, so you're going to need to allow more time because you need to adapt to different muscle group. It makes sense. So step number one is to do a fitness testing battery, get a baseline, and then from that, what are your strengths, what were you really good at, which fitness components were really strong, which were weak, which ones are important to get to optimal to reach your goal, and then focus on them.
Yeah. So in terms of then determining the amount of time we need to prepare, how do we know if an athlete only needs 3 months before their event to be ready? How do we know if they need 6 longer?
Yep.
Based on what event or goal they're trying to achieve?
Yeah, so look, obviously it's easy when we do lab testing in here because we can physically see the oxygen consumption that's being used. We can see how good your aerobic base is or your aerobic capacity versus your aerobic power versus your lactate threshold. So short answer is, hey, come see us, no dramas, we can sort it out. If you can't come see us, then it's really just sort of teeing into, it's like sort of figuring out, training history, all right? How many times have you done 3 Peaks before? How many marathons have you done? If you've done 6 or 7 marathons over 4 years, look, you're probably not going to need as long a base and build phase as somebody who's doing it for the first time. So you can't be as specific when you do field testing, but you come into this, you just come in with the mindset of, all right, what's my training history like? What's my injury history like? Can you tolerate the load? Yep. And you can get a pretty good idea of how long you need. So using Nicola as the example, it was 4 months anyway, that's all he had. That's how much time he had, and obviously Nick was the one coaching, so I can't take credit for this. This was all him. he had never done that sort of distance before, so needs analysis there says, hey, we need to do some volume, and the specific intensity is relatively low because it's just going to be get through the distance with a couple little short, not short and sharp, but obviously there's 3 peaks in there, isn't there? So there's going to be a little bit of stuff close to threshold. If he had done 3 peaks before, he could have got away with 3 months training. If he had done nothing, if he hadn't even done 70.3s before, no training history whatsoever, came at a low base level of fitness, then you're going to look at 6, 7 or 8 months. So figure out how much time you need in the base phase. What is your base already like? If it's good, 3 months is probably going to be fine. If it's not good, well, then we're looking at sort of 6 to 7.
Yeah. So overall, if we're trying to, particularly that volume aspect, by that takes a lot longer to develop in our physiology than the shorter, sharper stuff. So giving that time prior, if you are going for those big distances, the one that springs to mind is Carl, who I also coach, who did 3 peaks as well, but came off the back of New Zealand coast to coast, massive volume. It's almost 16-hour event over 2 days. He then went into a 4-week sort of tune up for 3 peaks and was fine. We didn't do a lot of volume, more just worked on the intensity side of things. He then went sub 10. So difference there where he did all his volume prior, may not have been 100% on the bike in that volume, but because he's done that long period beforehand, tweaking it for the bike was a little bit easier. We didn't need to go, now we're going to wait another 3 months before we do a big cycling event. He's already built that. Let's just focus on the shorter stuff, quicker to it.
Just quickly on that, for those playing at home, what were the distances for the coast to coast?
Pretty much the event summed up is you go from one side of New Zealand to the other. I know there's definitely 70 kilometres of kayaking in it. I'm probably going to get the bike and run distances wrong, but everything else is made up of trail running and then flat road cycling. So one side of New Zealand to the other, it took him 16 hours. He's a pretty fairly solid athlete overall. He can move on the bike as well. So yeah, in terms of how far we're going, you imagine how long it might take you. It's quite a long way, much bigger than sort of
that's it. And you look
traditional event.
Yeah, and you look at the training history. Used to represent New Zealand in track cycling.
Yeah, freak.
So he's a gun already. So genetically he's good. He's coming off the back of fair length of time. How long was
huge?
he?
Yeah, we started that build for Coast to Coast middle of last year.
Yeah, so more than 6 months of consistent training. Beyond, I'd say, you have to correct me on this, but beyond 10, 15 hours a week for a lot of it.
We're up at 22, 24 by the end of it.
Yeah, so you're not going to need, you have a bit of downtime. He's got the genetics there anyway. He's got all the structures and the muscles are there. He just needs to do a quick bit of fine tuning, so you don't need to have a massive build off the back of that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So I guess leading off that, we sort of work through what do we actually need to. We've identified the parts of an athlete that we need to train. We've identified potentially how long they need to train for. How do we then know what sessions to then implement at the right time? And I think this is the one that a lot of athletes ask us all the time. What should I be doing at this part of my training plan versus in 6 weeks' time versus in 3 months' time when I'm getting close to the event? How does it differ? How do I know what I should be doing, and then types of sessions that we could choose?
Yeah, I mean, this is where it's always a little bit tricky at times. It all comes off the back of the needs analysis, as we said. Look, I'm not going to go into exactly what each zone is, so on and so forth. We've got heaps of content out there. Just chuck the link in the comments below so you can send it off that. But look, if you're in the base, you work backwards. Let's reverse engineer it. What date is the event? All right, this is the event. If it's going to be pretty fatiguing, more than 4 hours, we're probably going to want that full taper, which we spoke about last week. So let's say we've got 10 days of taper. We're going to have a 2-week peak, and then depending on what your strengths and weaknesses were, somewhere between a 4 and an 8 week build, which is going to be that specific, it's threshold zone 3 stuff into zone, maybe fraction of zone 5, depending how you're going. And then everything prior to that will be base. Okay, so that base period is going to change depending on, again, your training history. What's your base fitness already like? If it's already good, then we could probably just do 4 weeks of base straight into a build. If it's coming off a low base, you've had some time off, maybe it's your first marathon versus your 15th marathon, then we might want to extend that out up to about 12 weeks. So generally speaking, I'd say a full base build peak is somewhere around 6 to 8 months, absolute tops. More than that, and we're just sort of trying to figure out what we're doing. So in terms of sessions, base, we know zone 2, zone 4, so easy. In the absence of lactic acid, we want to build your aerobic capacity. Zone 4 is your VO2 stuff, 3 on, 3 off, 2 on, 2 off, 4 on, 4 off. Again, if this is news to you guys, find the links below because we've talked about this heaps.
Jump on the Mets Mastermind group if you're not already in it. We've already got heaps of content specifically on this going into those sessions in more detail. So we are skipping over it a little bit here because we will be repeating ourselves as we go through too much. But yeah, useful links. I'll chuck them down below so you can have a look at that as well.
Yeah, cool. So then we go to the build, and that's again specific. So zone 3 threshold, maybe a fraction of zone 5, but that's more of the peak. We're going to get the peak. We start to drop the volume off. Be specific, as specific to the event as you possibly can. If you're doing 3 peaks, specificity actually probably means zone 2 as opposed to zone 3. If you're doing something that's 3 hours in length, then you would be in that zone 3. So being as specific as you can with a tiny bit of really short, sharp, high intense zone 3 stuff, and then you get your 50% off for your peak and taper, or for your taper period there. So in terms of the sessions, and it's sort of coming to the next question, because what should I do? Should I run by time or cycle by time, or what's my rest period? Is it distance? Is it time? How long is too long? So on and so forth. So playing at home, if you've ever Googled 1K repeats or 1K effort or anything like that, we come up number 1 with one of our blog posts. It's the most viewed page on our website, and it was titled the Why 1K repeats is a misguided interval set. Okay, and it's quite controversial, but it's one of those ones that everyone does 1K repeats. I know I'm going from cycling to running here, but let's use that as an example. Everybody does 1K repeats, and 1K repeats are fine if you know what the goal of that session is. It's misguided because if you, depending on whether you go by distance or time and the intensity and the rest period, how long is the rest period? Is it a walk? Is it a float? Is it it changes the goal of the session. It completely changes the demand of the session. So I think a typical 1K repeat that someone will do is, all right, we're going to run 1K and we're going to do it probably at or just above your threshold pace. FTP. 60-second float recovery, and we go again. All right, so 1K on, 60 seconds off, 1K on, 60 seconds off, so on and so forth. Maybe you do 5. There's a few problems with that. 1K, one is distance, so 1K on, 60 seconds off. How long does it take you to run a K? Okay, we've got, Tyler is not here today, he's going to run a K in 3 minutes flat. So he's got a work to rest ratio of 3 on, 1 off, 3 minutes on, 1 minute off. You go get a beginner who's just started out running and they do a 1K repeat in 6 minutes. All right, 6 minutes on, 1 minute off. Now it's a 6-to-1 work to rest ratio. It completely changes the energy system. Good luck holding FTP for 6 minutes, or above FTP for 6 minutes. We know that we've never seen anyone go above 7 in our testing.
With that really short recovery too.
Yeah, bugger that. Do that. You're gonna blow yourself up. So what happens if you're doing a 6 minute 1K? You start off strong, you get slower. Perceived exertion goes up, but your pace gets slower. It's a really poor stimulus. So should we do that session? You can, but all right. Either do distance and distance or time and time. So you could do 1K on, 200 float, because at least that float, for the person who's doing a 6 minute K, that's still going to be a slow float, right? So at least it's consistent with your work to rest ratios. The alternative is, why don't we just do it by time? Why don't you say, all right, you've got a gun who's doing 3 minute Ks, all right, you're going to run 3 minutes at 3 minute Ks, and then you can have a 60-second rest if you want. And again, it's going to come down to being specific, which I'll cover in a sec, but 3 minutes on, 60 seconds off. That's good. Why is it good? Well, one, we've controlled the work to rest ratio, and we say, all right, if we want a 3-to-1 work to rest ratio, which is going to be a pretty good threshold session, then old mate who's doing 6 minutes can now maybe, all right, they get 2 minutes off, 6 on, 2 minutes off. Now at least it's the same across the board, which is a common problem when we do group coaching, is that, whoever's the slowest struggles the most because they get less rest. The other thing why time is really effective is because if you've got this guy doing 3 minute Ks and they get fitter, and they can now do 2:45 minute Ks, which is quick. If you're saying 1K repeats, well, you've just reduced the load from 3 minute Ks to 2:45. So every interval set, you've got 15 seconds of less time at your desired intensity, okay? Because you're not working any harder. You're still at whatever, 90%, but your 90% is now better because you're fitter. So you've got 2:45 on and you might still have 60 off. So your work to rest ratio is changing. So if you just set a time, I'm going to hold 3 minutes at whatever the intensity you want with the same rest, it's going to be consistent across the board. You don't want to reduce your load as you get fitter, you want to get more fit. Okay. It would be okay if you did, all right, let's do 6 reps, and now you get to 2:45 instead of 3, all right, let's add in a 7th, then, all right, we've increased the load. But if you just go by either of the two, you can see the problem. It's either you're reducing the time as you get fitter, or if you go by time and then, so you go by distance then time, or how long does it take you to get that distance done? So it's a misguided interval set because I don't think people understand what the goal of that is. And if you can, it's same with any session, it doesn't matter what we're doing. If you can describe the goal of that session then it's a tick in the box. I don't care if you're doing 200s, 400s, a K or 5K efforts. As long as you know what that session is designed to do, and that's well aligned with being specific to the needs analysis we just did. So on the back of that, why do I say it's a misguided interval set? Well, if we want to do VO2 intervals, zone 4, again, if you've ever watched our stuff, we love these intervals. What do we need to do? We need to accumulate time at VO2 max while minimising the anaerobic contribution, which is the lactic acid. So we do 95% of our VO2 max, which is quick, and we have a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. So 2 on, 2 off, 3 on, 3 off, 4 on, 4 off. It's going to take a while for us to get to 95% because of the lag period of our heart rate, etc. Might take us 45 seconds to get up there. If it's a 2-minute interval, then we get a minute 15 at VO2. All right? We want to get to about 10 minutes of time at VO2. But if we then have let's say we do 3 on, 60 seconds off. It's 3 minutes on at desired pace and then 60 seconds off. You probably get through 2 or 3 intervals okay at the right pace, but 1, your legs are going to be heavy, so a lot of lactic acid, bad stimulus in mitochondria, and that's the goal of the session. And 2, as you go more and more and more, you're not going to be able to hold pace, or even if you can, probably a good sign that you should be going faster in the first place.
But
even if you can, you're going to get less stimulus. There's no benefit going harder. We just want to get stimulus at 95%, flush out the lactic acid because that's bad for the mitochondria, and repeat. Just get to 10 minutes of time at VO2, and that's an optimal session. All right, there's no points for going to 98% or 100% or 105%. All right, there's no benefit in doing it. So why would you give yourself more load and more injury risk when you can do less to actually get more stimulus? So a lot of little jargon going around here, but the point is that a 1K repeat for most people is going to fall in that range of not 2 minutes, but 2 to 4, 3 to 4. So if you want to do a VO2 session, your base phase, you're better off having a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. Walking to get rid of lactic acid, you get better stimulus. If you want to do a threshold session, then you could do 1K. If that's specific, if you're a 1500 metre runner, buddy, do 1K. It's happy days. If you're a marathon runner, half marathon runner, time trial cyclist, crit racer, etc., maybe not crit, I'll come back to that in a sec, then why do a K which is sort of 3 to 6 when you could do something more specific like, all right, if I'm going to do a half marathon, well, you're probably on the limit for more than an hour. So let's go do a 10 on at that similar pace with a 5 off, a 2-to-1 work to rest ratio, or a 10 on, a 20 and a 10 or whatever it is, something that's a bit more specific to the demands or the needs analysis of that event. That being said, look, there's nothing wrong with those sessions. What's a positive about a 1K repeat off short recovery? It's fun, generally. It's good variety. It's easy to manage in large groups. But as I said before, even in group scenario, you're better off going distance and distance, or time and time. Don't mix them up because that's going to really change the work to rest ratio for each individual.
Yeah, I think the key off that the sort of highlight is it's work to rest ratio. That's probably your starting point for all of this. Is you change that work to rest. We have 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, so equal work to equal rest, and that rest right back down to all the way at low intensity, working right up at 95% of max, is a very different session to if we have 2 minutes on, 1 minute off. Very different session to 3 minutes on, 1 minute off. We're manipulating how much working time versus how much resting time, but it changes the physiology involved in our sessions. And if anyone's tried, if you try and hold maximum for 3 minutes and then you go jog for a minute and then you try and do it again, it's so hard to be able to maintain that intensity. So we need that equal recovery. If that's not the aim of the session, then we change the work to rest. If we're trying to get that fatigue in the legs and tolerate it, more about that shorter recovery. And that's why guys will do like 5-10 minute efforts. And I want to talk to you about this is it more specific to go and do, you mentioned sort of 1500 metre runner, great, we can go do a 1K repeat, but what would a marathon runner do instead? You sort of mentioned they probably wouldn't be as specific. What interval would they likely do that's probably going to give them a better stimulus anyway? Similar adaptation in terms of that tolerance to the fatigue, but what's a better set of numbers to be working off? Do we want to do 1K repeats? Do we want to do longer interval? Do we want to do maybe shorter stuff?
Yeah, I mean, look, a couple of factors. You got to enjoy your sessions too. So you got to adherence is really important to a program. Like I love giving out 20 minutes on race pace, or even a fraction above, with a 10-minute jog recovery at endurance zone. That is such a great session. It's so stimulating. It's very, very specific, but it's mentally pretty bloody hard, isn't it? Yeah, it's boring and hard. You couldn't do that 8 weeks in a row. No one would do it. They'd get sick of it. So what's another variety? Well, it's really like, all right, we're doing threshold, so we want 2-to-1 or less rest. So 2-to-1, which could be I'm just use examples here. It could be 3 minutes on, 1 minute off. That's a 3 to 1, or sorry, 2 to 1's 2 on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off, 4 on, 1 off, whatever. You want to have less rest than you do effort, because the whole goal of a threshold session, for example, is lactic acid in, partial recovery, back in. But we want to keep the pace up there, but we don't want to be stupidly exhausted by the end of the session either. So, in terms of what a better interval is, longer is better probably for your longer runs up there, but you're still going to do probably 1 track set a week. And what that can be is, hey, it can be 1K repeats. I don't care. Just make sure that the effort time and the rest time is in line with a threshold session. So one that we often do is 5 on, 2.5 off. That's a little bit better. Is it a walk or a jog recovery? Well, it depends. How far beyond threshold have you gone? Like if you want to hold 110% threshold for 5 minutes, you're going to be pretty knackered. You're probably going to have to walk a minute and then jog a minute and a half, all right? Or do you hold right on your 100% FTP, and then you can actually jog your 2.5, right? How do you overload that session? More, maybe you go to 6 minutes, still keep that 2.5, or do you keep 5 minutes and then go down to 2? Again, what's more specific, number one, and also what's more enjoyable, because that's really important. So you can't really go wrong. Threshold's really quite easy to train, because it's just lactic acid in, lactic acid out. But you just want to make sure you're overloading it, keeping the athlete interested, and making sure that it's specific to the demands of what you're doing. Does that cover it?
Yeah, I think so. That's pretty much it. It's hit the nail on the head in terms of, it is really quite simple. It's just manipulate that work to rest ratio. It's changing this focus of the session, but you apply that to the appropriate time, and that's where we do see those big results. I mean, with coming back to Nicola's example of 3 peaks, we gave him a lot of those VO2 intervals because we need his aerobic side of things to be right up there. That's his high intensity, the 1 on, 1 off. But then once we got close, we started moving into those shorter recoveries. He's doing hill repeats. He's getting very, very specific into the fact that he now has to climb, short rest on a little false flat, climb again, rest on the descent, climb again. Again, we can manipulate it around that, work around how long do we think the climb is. The climb 20 minutes, and then we get a 10-minute rest because it's 10 minutes downhill, and then again, all these factors start to come into it.
Yeah, so you just want to be really specific, and so I don't want to hone in too much more, but if you look at like a crit racing example where it's sort of stop and start and all that sort of stuff, that's where you can do really short stuff, with like, should you do a walk or a jog recovery? What should you do? Yeah. Again, it depends what the goal is. If you can, for a marathon runner, you're better off doing a jog recovery in the threshold phase, because you want to keep slightly elevated lactic acid levels, right? You want to be able to get back to that intensity quite quick. But if you're doing something like 1,500 metre running, why would you do a jog recovery? Yeah, it's not going to happen. You want to go flat out for a K, and then you want to have pretty much full recovery and go again. Do it again, lots of little things on there. It's not that complicated, but it's just what do you need? What's specific? What do you need to do? And what we're trying to get across with any sessions that you do is just be specific. Be specific and know what the goal of the session is. Is it a zone 2? Is it a threshold? Is it a VO2 max session? And if it's a VO2 max session, you should be walking and having proper recovery, because you cannot I don't care who you are, you're not maintaining 95% for 20 minutes if you're having very short recovery. And if you think you can, then your fitness has changed, because it's so dynamic. Your 3-minute Ks might be your 95% now. In 4 weeks' time, it actually could be 2:45. You hold 3-minute Ks, is easy. Well, that's your threshold pace now, close enough too. So it's so dynamic.
Yeah, cool. I guess last thing to go through before we do wrap up, and this is something that we hear quite a lot just through talking to people and hearing it around, and we've sort of spoken a lot about interval training. We touched on a bit about when volume is a specific aspect to training with Nicola, and 3 peaks in those longer events with Carl, etc., where volume is key. But I just want to get your thoughts on the notion that Mets as a whole, our philosophy is low volume, all about high intensity interval. 1, is it true? Or 2, when do we add that volume in, and when is it used? Because it's something that we do hear quite a bit. Do we just do interval training? Are we all about that? As opposed to volume, and when does volume come in handy? Yeah, cool. I mean, as you look externally, if you've never talked to us before and you just looked at us on social media, you probably think, these guys they're throwing a spanner in the works, and all they do is VO2 intervals to make an Ironman athlete really great, which is, it's just not right. So again, it comes back to the needs analysis and what your physiological strengths and weaknesses are. Like in the endurance industry, the majority of athletes that come to us already, they're already got a very good base, because everyone understands the importance of base training phase. So if you come in here with a massive base, you can no worry, you can run your marathon already very slowly, but you can run it. If you can complete the distance fine, then the answer is that we want to complete the distance more quickly. So if you come in here and we see that you've got a really good aerobic capacity,
but then you don't have a good aerobic power, there's no benefit in doing 20, 25, 30 hours of long slow.
Yeah.
That's a physiological strength. You might get 1 or 2% gains by focusing on your physiological strength, but you're doing 95% of your stuff long slow volume. Your aerobic power and your threshold is generally pretty ordinary, so we can get a 10, 15, 20% gain by doing shorter, sharper intervals. All right? So we've had people who've come from 20 hours to 8 hours and they've improved by 10, 15%. But on the flip side, it's not always the case. It's always nice when you can improve someone, 10, 15% in the 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But if we had somebody who came in with a poor base, and I guess we can just see it, we just do a treadmill test, do a bike test, we see what their base is like. If they come in with a poor base, then there's no shortcuts. You have to do volume, right? And it happens quite a lot. And Nicola's probably a good example where there was no need for him to do 6, 7, 8 hours of training because he was doing an event that took 4.5. But then, all right, he now needs to do it. His training history, he's never done that before. We definitely need analysis. We need to do volume, and we did that. And his top end didn't change. And maybe we can do a screenshot and share the data.
Yeah.
But if Nicole's happy with that, find out first.
Yeah.
His top end didn't change, but his base, his fraction of expired was, I don't know what the percentage was, but it was probably 25% better. It was heaps, wasn't it?
Yeah. So it all moved. I mean, it just pushed what we see is we just see that graph shift to the right. So really, his ability at the bottom end was just, he was able to just maintain that same efficiency, if you like, and keep it nice and simple. Of his ability to use oxygen just got way better in those longer, slower intensities. The top end, it was still declining as such in the same way, the same path. But so I mean, next phase of training, if we're looking at his next event, maybe do we go, all right, let's focus on that top end to improve that aspect now, because it is his weakness now, as opposed to being potentially a strength before. So that's where you just look at it from the next step and go, what's the next phase of training like?
Well, that's right. If you're thinking like, all right, this is Nicola previous and this is him now, so this is basically, once we get to the top here, that's his VO2 max, right? So he started at a lower level, so the graph was the same, it just shifted down, and it spikes up, I want to make sure I'm still on screen, it spikes up. This was his absolute max. His muscles couldn't use up any more oxygen, but we still got a bit of wiggle room,
further.
And it worked out to be 24% more, and that was just because he had a big change in his base, and it's because we did that. We went and did, you told him to do 11, 12, 13, we were doing like 7-hour rides on the weekend.
Yeah, some big sessions in there.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing we saw, we saw it in Carl as well. Came in, hadn't done an ultra event before, really. Does a big ultra endurance off-road event, coast to coast. We did all of that volume work. Similar progression. He's coming into test next week, so hopefully we'll see that change. But in terms of, we're going to see that bottom end help us towards the top, because if we have that good foundation to start with, those early workloads super comfortable, easy. Once we get to those higher workloads, we're able to then put on 30 watts at the top at VO2 max, 360 instead of 330, because we're using more oxygen. Yeah.
So in answer to that question, we are not anti-high volume. We are about training smart. What are you good at? What are you not good at? What do you need to be good at for your event? We focus on the weaknesses, which it just so happens that 80% of people that we see are already good at aerobic base. So why do we do more aerobic base? We don't. We do other stuff.
Yeah.
Shorter, sharper stuff.
Yeah.
You come in with a poor base, we're going to do base. So that's not one or the other. It's what can we do? We want to provide the minimum stimulus to get maximum adaptation. That's all about training smart.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Just in quick sort of summary, it's all coming down to the goal of the athlete, specifically what we need to do. What areas of their physiology do we need to improve? Let's focus on those. That's going to give us an indication of how much time to spend, and then manipulate those work to rest ratios to suit it. And again, it's not so much a case of we're one way or the other. It's the athlete's going to determine that. We just apply it to the situation and go, who needs what? Do you need that aerobic capacity? Do you need that extra volume work? Or is it more about the high intensity for you because it's the other way around in terms of strengths and weaknesses? It's all just, what's the scenario? Let's sum it up. What do we need? Move on. There's not one right or wrong, as long as you can justify it and understand what the purpose is.
Exactly, find the purpose.
And at the right time.
It's all good.
Pretty much a winner. So what we'll do is we'll link the Mets Mastermind. I know we referred to it a bit down below. So if you want to check out some of our previous content, explain a bit more about the zones and some more detail around those sessions. I might link as well that blog post on the 1K repeats is a good one. It goes through some of those sessions as well. If you want to check out our Instagram at Mets Performance to see some of Nicola's results, you're able to see his VO2 max change and the actual data that we got, his VO2 previously in November versus now in March. Go have a look at that as well. Otherwise, that'll do for today's episode of the Physiology Secrets podcast. Hope you're enjoying these new versions with the videos as well. If you've got any questions, please let us know. Send them through to nick@metsperformance.com.